social media sites rife with images of hyper-sexuality, predominantly young women who are, some of them who are major influencers, give the youngest of our digitally consuming generation the impression that that is how you're supposed to look, that this is how you're supposed to think and feel and act to get what you want, to get who you want, to be what you're supposed to be, as if some fantasy of aesthetic perfection is the road to happiness. It is not.
What happens when the massively popular man who plays Jesus on hit Christian TV series The Chosen steps onto a stage in Washington, D.C. and calls out an entire culture to its face? At the 2023 March for Life, Jonathan Roumie didn't just give a speech. He lit a fire. He spoke about life, about faith, and about the subtle poison in our entertainment, our politics, and our priorities. And it was not sugar-coated at all. Here on this channel, we're going to pull apart what he said, connect it to the world you and I are living in right now, hear his own personal analysis of this risky speech at the end, and ultimately answer the question no one in the mainstream wants to. Are we shaping the culture, or is the culture shaping us? As you watch, as you feel moved, convicted, inspired, saddened, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Welcome to Make Faith Famous. Let's get into it.
Newton's law of motion says that every action has an equal and opposite reaction. This also applies to the spiritual realm. Having played the Son of God for the last 3 seasons on a television show you may have heard of called The Chosen, I've spent a lot of time dwelling in the realm of spirit through prayer, meditation, and the sacraments of my faith. And let me tell you, it changes you from the inside out, and that's a good thing. But it can be scary because you begin to see the truth manifest itself in all areas of your life, like a veil that has been lifted, and you can't unsee what you have seen. God begins to give you glimpses of more of everything, inviting you to journey, to go deeper with Him. But just as God is real, Satan is also real. And I'm not talking about the simplistic cartoon of some dude with horns and a tail. I'm talking about the father of lies, the great deceiver, the diabolical slanderer who pushes you to doubt when you know in your heart the right thing to do. And he is not about to give up this fight either. In fact, he's doubling down because guess what? His time is limited. So he's throwing everything that he has at the world and all of us in it. And countless are being deceived as a result. But that's his job. He wants your and my destruction. He wants us to believe that abortion does not harm us individually and as a society. So please, I beg of you, pray for those who do not have the faith, the strength, the clarity of purpose that you here do. People ask me, how do you try to emulate Jesus in your own life when playing Him? Well, loving my enemies, praying for those who persecute me and those who may protest me, is the first place that I have to start. But remember, my dear friends, we know how the story ends. God won. He won, and Christ reminds us that He is with us until the end of the age. And that said, we need to take a quick glance into the mirror of culture, which communicates a few concerns about where we are as a society that I'd like to propose a couple of thoughts about for your consideration, if I may. I want to speak particularly to those of you here that identify with Gen Z and even Gen Alpha. Give it up for Gen Z and Gen Alpha. You are in your formative years, and at a moment in time when you have the power to change culture by impacting the culture through the raising of your powerful voices and voting with your conscience and your resources. For some time now, we have been witnesses to a mounting polarity between light and dark. We've seen it manifest itself in many facets of culture. But I would like to address it as I see it as an artist in the entertainment industry. In the last several years, there's been a sharp and disturbing increase in the darkness of the imagery being used in film, television, and music. The landscape has become increasingly sinister, and in some cases, even demonic in tone, more so than in previous years, sometimes subliminal, oftentimes overt. Storylines involving the occult, witchcraft, demons, and even satanic elements are commonplace in mainstream programming. Many feature spiritually and psychologically disturbing content. And before you jump on me, no, I'm not specifically referencing a certain bespectacled wizard, though a few folks might disagree, but I'm referring to the media which is even more ominous. And I don't need to name names. You know it when you see it.
Now, I'm not going to sit here and say every music video or streaming show is some secret occult ritual. That's the easy scapegoat. What I see isn't a bunch of people praying to demons. It's people building altars to themselves. It's selfishness on display, just dressed up in neon lights and slow-motion shots. The darkness here isn't a guy in a red cape with horns. It's the glorification of ego, ambition, and me-first living. It's the story that says you are the center of the universe, and anything or anyone that gets in your way, they're disposable. And the problem isn't just the shock value. It's that this kind of media trains people, especially young people, to value instant gratification over anything real. Why have patience when you can have pleasure now? Why invest in real relationships when you can collect attention online? Why live for others when you can make yourself the star of the show? That's the worship I'm seeing. Not worship of some ancient idol, but worship of self. And if you think that's harmless, you're missing how corrosive it is. A culture built on me first can't hold together because love, real love, always says, okay, no, you before me. So yeah, maybe it's not a conspiracy in the shadows. Maybe it's just worse. It's a slow, constant training to care less, to feel less, and to make yourself the only thing that matters. And if that's not darkness, I don't know what is.
The youngest of us and the most vulnerable, as well as those who are not grounded in a solid faith in God, are susceptible to the influences of these images. Media has become a portal to behavior and attitudes kids want to emulate that reject God, reject the light, and reject ultimately all those aspects of community which give life. I have observed God subtly but radically being removed from popular culture over the last couple of decades, replaced with some of the most corruptive images and ideologies for young hearts and minds. And any of us who profess any kind of faith are branded as fundamental or condemned for their beliefs with the assertions of the religiosity of a Pharisee. This is completely contrary to what it means to have a relationship with Jesus Christ and follow his teachings. If only the rest of the world actually took the time to explore what it means to follow Jesus' heart. Yes, there are always individual exceptions, unfortunately, but for the majority of believers, God is love, and true love gives way to life, not death. They say we live in a post-Christian society. I reject that.
This phrase, post-Christian society, gets tossed around like it's some badge of sophistication, as if we've matured past all that old religion stuff and finally learned to stand on our own. But if you look closely at what we've actually built in this so-called post-Christian world, it's not progress. It's just a reshuffling of the same human problems. We still wrestle with injustice, but instead of seeking mercy and forgiveness, we cancel and destroy. We still chase meaning, but instead of looking to something bigger than ourselves, we chase careers, experiences, and followers, hoping they'll fill the gap, and they never do. We still long for community, but we settle for loose online tribes that dissolve the second you disagree on something. In other words, we haven't outgrown faith. We've just replaced it with a thin imitation. And here's the irony. The values people still admire, compassion, equality, human dignity, those didn't appear out of thin air. They were rooted in a worldview that saw every person as made in the image of God. Remove the foundation, and the words stay for a while. But the meaning drains out. So when Roumie says, I reject that, he's not just being nostalgic for a Christian America or whatever political talking point you want to throw out. He's rejecting the idea that the modern world is somehow richer or wiser without God, because if we're honest, post-Christian is just code for we do what we want and nobody can tell us otherwise. And history is clear. Cultures built on pure self-determination eventually tear themselves apart. If that's the road we're on, then rejecting it isn't stubbornness, it's survival. And if you want to help out our channel and our movement here, if you want to signal to others that it's time to change course, please consider checking out the QR codes and links you see below to pick up the signature Make Faith Famous hats in a variety of colors with Bible verse Matthew 5:16 on the back and this catchy, globally unifying slogan of Make Faith Famous on the front. All right, back to Jonathan.
You can reject that. Change the culture by impacting the culture. Embrace that which is bigger than you. He who gave you abundant life and he who has called you by name. Do not be afraid. Mute the noise of the popular and embrace the counterculture of Christ's love and the message he offers you. The road is wide which leads to destruction, and many will enter it. So enter through the narrow gate, my dear friends, for therein lies the kingdom of heaven. Social media sites rife with images of hyper-sexuality, predominantly young women who are, some of them who are major influencers, give the youngest of our digitally consuming generation the impression that that is how you're supposed to look, that this is how you're supposed to think and feel and act to get what you want, to get who you want, to be what you're supposed to be, as if some fantasy of aesthetic perfection is the road to happiness. It is not.
This is one of the most pervasive lies in our culture, and it's so normalized we barely notice it anymore. Scroll through social media, flip on a music video, watch a Netflix series. It's everywhere. Not just sexuality, but a curated sexuality. Bodies posed, lit, filtered, and edited until they barely resemble reality. And then that image gets fed to millions of people as normal, or worse, ideal. The impact is brutal. For women, especially young women, it says your worth is in how close you can get to an impossible beauty standard. For men, it says women are objects to be evaluated and consumed. And for both, it plants the idea that love is secondary. What matters is attraction, performance, image. But here's the thing. This isn't just about lust. It's about control. The more insecure you are about your looks, the easier you are to sell to, the more you believe relationships are built on chemistry and appearances, the less patience you have for the slow, messy work of real love, and the less you value real love, the easier it is for a culture of instant gratification to keep you hooked. And the so-called empowerment message that if you flaunt yourself, you're somehow in control, it's a trap, because the second you start basing your power on your appearance, you hand control over to the crowd. If they approve, you feel strong. If they don't, you feel worthless. That's not power. That's dependence on constant validation. Roumie's point here isn't to shame beauty or attraction. It's to call out a culture that has weaponized them. When the standard is perfection and the currency is attention, you don't get intimacy, you get performance. And that's not love. It's marketing.
Your imperfections were perfectly designed by God in heaven. As if by objectifying yourself, you will somehow be empowered. That is an empty lie of the enemy. The only way to empower yourself is to believe in the greatness of who you are, flaws and all, the gifts you bring into this world that God freely gave you, the uniqueness of your precious life, and to share them with one another. That is your legacy. That is your power. That is who you are meant to be. And that is how you will change the world. Do not let mainstream media's shallow depictions of sexuality and sexual irresponsibility deceive you into thinking that such an approach to love and relationships is without consequences. It isn't. And this is part of the systemic issue that brings us here today. I know how difficult it can be to think differently, to swim against the current, to choose life in a culture that celebrates death. You know, standing here saying these things to you now was neither the obvious career choice nor an easy decision for me, because I've never set foot in this arena before, publicly. But ultimately, I had no choice. This guy made me do it. And I'm a better man for it. A few years ago, I made a commitment to follow the promptings of the Spirit, and I stand by it, and it's why I'm here today. So I'll leave you with a few final thoughts. We are under an assault on our sense of virtue. We're enduring an affront to the innate holiness we are all imbued with and called to, and an attack on the family structure and the sacredness of the gift of life. But as ones created in the image and likeness of God, who is himself love, we are charged to be the standard bearers who defend and preserve the dignity of every human, but especially the most vulnerable, which begins with the initial stages of life and continues throughout the entire cycle, from conception through that phase we all aim to enter into, our golden years, followed by the final stages of our earthly existence. Nannies and pop-pops, every one of us, if we are called to it. How can you make a difference? Examine and expose the areas of darkness in your world, in your community, in your immediate society that need your light, and bring it everywhere you go. Change the culture by impacting the culture. Raise your voice, vote with your resources, financial, spiritual, and temporal.
This is one of those phrases that sounds obvious but is easy to dismiss until you realize how few people actually live it out. Most of us talk about wanting change, but we're waiting for someone else to start it. We want Hollywood to suddenly make wholesome films. We want politicians to pass the right laws. We want schools to teach what we think is important. In other words, we want the culture to fix itself without us having to do much, but that's not how culture works. Culture is just the sum of what people create, celebrate, and tolerate, which means if you want to change it, you have to change what you create, celebrate, and tolerate. And that starts small, in your home, in your community, in your circle of influence. If the world around you is shallow, don't just complain about it. Create something deep. If it's loud with noise and outrage, be the one who brings quiet and clarity. If it worships the self, model what it looks like to serve others. That's how you actually shift the current, by swimming against it long enough that others start to follow. The danger is thinking you have to go viral to make a difference. You don't. Culture isn't just shaped by mass movements. It's shaped by thousands of small acts of faithfulness. Raising kids who know right from wrong is culture shaping. Supporting art that tells the truth is culture shaping. Choosing integrity over quick success is culture shaping. Roumie's challenge here is simple but inconvenient. Stop outsourcing the work of change. The culture is going to reflect whatever we keep putting into it. If we want something better, we have to stop feeding the beast we claim to hate and start building something worth passing down.
My commitment to impacting the culture as an artist is to pray I get to continue participating in telling stories like The Chosen and my upcoming film, Jesus Revolution, that shine a light on the struggles and successes of the human condition. Stories that uphold human dignity and reveal God's truth, an infinite love for his people despite our inherent flaws. And we are all so very beautifully flawed, perhaps myself most of all. But we are not alone. He has lived as one of us, and that brings us into communion with him. By honoring the life that God gave you, by bringing your gifts to the world with love and compassion, you will be creating an environment of holiness which the most impressionable in our society will draw their examples from, and to help rewire the attitudes of society's collective consciousness, steering it back towards the preservation and value of life, restoring respect for faith and true religious tolerance, and healing some of our beloved nation's wounds in the process, while hopefully planting us more deeply within God's grace. It's been an honor to be with you here. Thank you for inviting me. God bless you.
And next up, we're actually going to pivot to a very insider baseball interview that Jonathan gives that actually dives deep into his mindset as he prepared for this speech. It's really quite eye-opening, and like most things with Roumie, it's a lot deeper than it appears on the surface. He didn't just show up to a speech to get paid. He had a whole supernatural experience and back and forth and personal internal growth that had to take place before he go up on that stage. And I'm very excited to have found this clip to show y'all. Let's listen in.
You know, and I know that in your business, you're not on the side that's popular or politically correct when you stand with the unborn. Where did the process of courage come from to say, may not be a good career move, but it's something I feel I'm called to do?
Like 6 feet away from where I'm sitting right now. I literally had committed to this nominally or ideologically, but I didn't quite know. I'd never been to a march. I hadn't quite invested in that, the idea of like what it would mean politically. I of course am on the side of life. Yeah. And when the offer came to me to appear, my publicist and I talked about it, and we thought it would be, there would be some value of me being there, but I didn't actually think I was going to talk about the things with the specificity that I said. Yeah. And as we got closer and closer, and so going into it, my approach was like, well, I want to write something that is relatable to the theme, but I don't think that it's just as you were saying, for the reasons you mentioned, it's probably not a good idea professionally for me to throw my ring into that hat full on. And I talked to a few other friends in the business, some of whom are very well known as actors, about their thoughts and their experiences and some of the backlash they had received as a result of participating in this effort. And so I came away with like, okay, I'll just, my talk will be something that is relatable, but I won't put, a fine point on it. And as I got closer and closer, and this is months ago, I had committed, I couldn't think of a single thing to write. I had ideas and topics, and every time I sat down to write, nothing would happen. And I was starting to get a little panicked, especially when all of a sudden now it kept getting announced. And then I saw other people tweeting it, and like people in politicians were starting to talk about it and then mention my name. And I'm like, uh-oh, what have I done? And then I literally started to panic. And then so I basically got on my knees again. And I just said, okay, Lord, you got to help me here, because I don't know what I'm supposed to do. And I felt, it wasn't an audible voice, but I felt him say to me, you know what you have to do. You know what I want you to do. And I started to get emotional about it, because I knew that was what he was calling me to do. And I didn't want to do it. And I was afraid, and I was full of fear. And I thought, like, what's this going to mean? What's this going to mean? And the whole time he's like, I got you. I got you. You're going to be fine. And once I accepted that, like, I couldn't write fast enough. I didn't have to think. It just started pouring out of me. Yeah. And then the night before, I was writing is rewriting. So I was literally rewriting it the night before. I got some input to when I learned how many kids were going to be there. I got some input that led me to tweak it just slightly to address all these kids. Mm-hmm. And that morning, there was a couple of things I just did on the fly. For instance, recommending praying the rosary. That just kind of came to me as I was walking on stage. And so I delivered the talk, the speech, or whatever, and it seemed to go over really well and seemed to resonate, especially with young people. And I wouldn't hesitate to do it again. And I feel like, it's every step of my journey, whether it's been in my career or now in terms of the social activism, it has been guided by God, and the fear has been vanquished the minute I just let it go and give it to Him.
Father God, I just lift up Jonathan to you. Bless his mission, his calling. Bless this channel, these amazing viewers, and thank you for your presence and for your grace as we strive every single day to make faith famous.